I'm Julie Baumgardner, and this is the Marriage on the Daily podcast, the podcast designed to give you tools and encouragement to help you do married well on the daily. Because after all, it isn't the grand gestures that make or break your marriage. It's actually what you do or don't do on the daily that either builds a strong foundation or chips away at your core. You can do this, and I'm here to help. I'm your host, Julie Baumgardner. Today, my guest is Dr. Kimberling. Many know him as Dr. Kim. He has worked with couples for more than 40 years. He is the president and co-founder of Awesome Marriage, which is designed to help couples build an awesome marriage. He's the author of 7 Secrets of an Awesome Marriage and 14 Keys to Lasting Love. And he also has a weekly podcast called the Awesome Marriage Podcast. He is married to his beautiful bride, Nancy. They've been married for more than 50 years. They have 2 children, 5 grandchildren, and 1 great-grandchild, which I think is just awesome. First, welcome. I appreciate you being with us today. And I would love for us to launch our conversation by talking about what you have seen happen with couples in the first 10 years that is great, but can often really take away from the connection that is so vitally important in marriage.
Sure. Well, thank you for asking me. It's great to be here. Love what you do, Julie, and it's so good to connect. When I saw that on my calendar pop up, whenever it was scheduled, I thought, oh, that'll be fun. So I've been looking forward to it all through the holiday season. So thank you for asking me. I appreciate it.
Well, we're excited you're here.
Yeah, I think, probably a number of places we could start. I mean, I think early on, most couples, usually the first year goes fairly well. We have some people don't. You'd have that honeymoon phase, but then you get this deal where some of the reality comes in. I remember when I don't know how long we've been married, but at home, when I was home with my parents, when I finished in the shower and dropped the towel, my mom was there to pick it up and to wash it and to have it back ready. And I used to clean the towel every day. And so that's what I didn't know any different. And so that was probably the first thing that Nancy said, I don't do it that way. And so so you learn stuff about each other, things that as much as people think, gosh, we're just alike and dating was wonderful, which it is, and that's great. But there's things you don't find out until you're married, until you're spending day after day with each other. And I think probably one of the things that pops up early are the expectations, and you think, my expectations aren't getting met, and you kind of begin to talk about that, and you look at maybe some of our expectations were unrealistic, and maybe you don't talk about it, and you continue to expect your spouse to do the things that are unrealistic, but you haven't told them what you want them to do.
Right.
And so
you need to read your mind.
So you're mad at them for not doing something you never told them to do. But I think we all have in our mind what marriage should look like from a family of origin or whatever, movies, all that kind of stuff. I was talking to a lady earlier today on a podcast, and she was just talking about this, the little girls grow up with Cinderella and stories like that, and it's happily ever after. And, we kind of get that planted in our minds pretty early, that even though maybe my parents aren't real happy or anything, when I get married, I'm going to have the happy ever after. And so we have those expectations that come in, and as you kind of begin to kind of work through that. And sometimes people will say, did I marry the wrong person? And I think the better question is, can I be the right person for my spouse? What do I need to do? I think we have such a tendency to point the finger at the other person and say, if you would do this, our marriage would really be good. Our marriage would be great if you'd stop doing this or do this and that, instead of just saying, what do I need to do? And so I think that's beginning to take responsibility for your part of the marriage. And sometimes that's harder to do for some people than it is for other people. But I think that's where we kind of, kind of get off early is just that, all those things go in, expectations. And, I think one of the stats that really bothered me that's been out a few years, that there's more divorces in the first year of marriage than ever before. And that's, to me, it's like, if we look at our marriage, I think we'd both say the hard times we went through is what got us to today, because we learned to go through it.
Totally agree.
We learned to put God where he needed to be in our marriage for those things to happen. And so I just feel sorry for couples that give up early because it's hard for everybody.
Yeah. It just makes me think, as you're talking, when you talk to couples who are preparing for marriage, they're engaged, and it's almost like they have rose-colored glasses on. They'll say, oh, we've talked about everything. I can't fathom that there's anything that's going to surprise us. And then they get into marriage, and it's kind of like dropping the towel on the floor and expecting that it's going to be picked up. Yeah. I think they get caught off guard. And when they are caught off guard, they're like, oh my gosh, what is happening?
Yeah.
I mean, I thought I married the right person, but this feels very disorienting. And I think just encouraging them, kind of like you said, that first of all, the expectations that are unspoken need to be spoken, because you can't read anybody's mind.
Yes.
And then to keep putting one foot in front of the other to figure out how can I be the right spouse, and how can we learn together?
One thing that might help the people who are listening, one of the things I have couples do is just have them write down all the expectations they have for their marriage, for their spouse. And then I ask them to go back, then to give it to the other person. And that person then says, are they realistic, not realistic, those kind of things. Yeah. And just kind of begin that process of just sharing that. Communicating is so important. And so taking the time, okay, you're not meeting my expectations, I'm not meeting yours. Let's talk about what is realistic for us, so we don't fight all the time about things that just are unrealistic for us to do anyway. Yeah. I think one of the big ones is expecting your spouse to meet all your needs, and that happens so often. And yet we know I've failed Nancy a bunch of times over the years. Yeah. Because I'm not perfect and I am human, and if she's not getting those big needs met from God, then it falls on me, and I'm going to mess up. And so I think that's really important to know that that you've got to let God meet the needs that he intends to meet in your life. And then what the things your spouse does kind of becomes icing on the cake. It's kind of like, wow, this is what a husband can do and a wife can do. Yeah. And so I think that's real important too.
Oh my gosh. I think that is so important to recognize. I mean, you will be so disappointed if you are expecting your spouse is going to complete you. But it makes me think, as you're talking about that, one, just not to miss that it's the Lord. It is that vertical relationship every day, growing and intentional, that will actually help your marriage be much better. But it makes me think, I hear people talk a lot about, your spouse needs to be your best friend. And I don't disagree with that. I wonder, though, what that definition is for some people, because when I hear some people talk about that, they'll be like, oh, that person needs to be my confidant. They need to go everywhere with me. They need to enjoy all of my hobbies. They need to be my lover. They need to be all these things, which, number one, sounds suffocating to some degree. And number two, it's very isolating. So I'm wondering if you could to speak to that in terms of what does healthy look like?
Yeah, I think it's important, to have good friends, good couple friends, other people that are involved in your life with you that want, really want the same things in life that you do, the same values. Maybe they go to your church with you, maybe you're in a small group at church with them. But I think that's really important because there's things that Nancy does that, I support her in it, but, I'm not going to go play mahjong. I decided so far I've not, and then there's things that I do that, that she's not as interested in. We support each other and encourage and know how valuable it is that we have those things.
Yes.
But it's important for us to have, other people in our lives, our friendships, that are so valuable, other couples that we can, one thing that I think is so good about small groups is community groups is in your church is that you can say something, well, we struggled with this week, and somebody else goes, oh yeah, we did that. We did that last year. Let me tell you what we did. So you begin to understand that a lot of things you're going through that may be troubling you are normal. And so I think it's so important to have other people. Nancy and I always tried to have a couple that was older than us. Just like a step old. If our kids were 6, we wanted somebody that had teenagers so they could speak into that with us. And we had some mentor couples that were what they shared with us was so invaluable to us because they'd been there and we respected them. We knew their values. We knew they wanted for their families what we wanted. And so it made such a difference to have those people to just share with and pour into. And my parents played a big role in that too. My parents had really why we have awesome marriage. It was kind of modeled after their marriage. They had a great marriage. Not perfect, but they learned how to navigate marriage and how to get everything out of it, I think, that God wanted for them. So that was really important. But yeah, I think you can't isolate. And I've seen couples do that, and you do get suffocated because if there's nobody else to carry some of that load, you can't carry it all. You just can't.
It makes me think about a couple of things. One, so you had parents who really modeled a beautiful marriage. Both my husband and I are children of divorce. And so coming into our marriage, we both said, hey, it's really important to us that we have some people to help us walk this road who have a healthy marriage, not a perfect marriage.
Right.
But some folks, I think they feel like, well, I don't know if we're going to make it or not because, the stats are that we stand a 50-50 chance. Which isn't exactly accurate. I mean, there are a lot of things you can do to help make your marriage healthy, successful, and thriving.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I don't think anybody ever walks out the door one day and says, I'm going to screw up my marriage. We all stand at that altar and we want things, but I think where I see the next big problem in the first 10 years is when maybe whatever year it is when you've got some kids, maybe 6, 7, somewhere in that range, children arrive. Children are such a blessing in our lives, and they're probably the biggest distraction in our lives in those years because they take time and energy, and that's nothing against it, but it does. And I think that's where I see a lot of couples begin to struggle because they just don't make the time for each other that they were making before they had kids. And then maybe at that same time, maybe they both work. Maybe their career demands in their career intensifies, and you just have these other things. Maybe we talked about the good things. Maybe you're active in your church. Maybe you're volunteering. Maybe you're doing a lot of really good things. But your marriage keeps sliding to the bottom. And it gets pushed down, and it's like, but we'll have time for that later. And I think anytime we set the marriage on the back burner, it should be, there's a fire there. I mean, we should not be doing that because that's not where our marriage belongs.
Yeah. Well, so I have seen a piece of research that talks about a child-centered marriage is the one that's most at risk for distress. But yet the culture tells us, when children come along, they need to be your priority. They need to be the center of your attention. So how do couples actually make their marriage the priority and not create the situation where it is a child-centered environment?
Sure. One of the things that I tell couples that sometimes it's kind of hard because there is a lot of stuff out there on social media and stuff, kids got to be most important first, all that kind of stuff. But I'll ask a couple, so do you want your kids to have a healthy marriage? And of course they say yes. And I said, well, you're their model. You are their textbook.
Yes.
So when you go on a date every week with each other, you're modeling for them. You're not leaving them behind. You get someone to stay with them, family members or somebody, that you really trust. And they need to see you date. They need to see you, that the marriage is the priority. My parents did a great job of that. I mean, I never felt I wasn't loved, but I knew who was number one. It was they were with each other, and that didn't bother me at all. It was like, it gave me a security, when I'd have and not that my parents didn't argue at times. They did. Very, very little, really. But when I'd be at friends' house and parents would be arguing and stuff, I'd be thinking, wow, these people might get a divorce. I never felt that at home. It was like, there was a security in knowing my parents prioritized the marriage like they did. Yeah. And they poured into it.
I think that is a really important point. It's almost like having that healthy, thriving marriage is like wrapping your children in a warm security blanket. They can be children and do the things that children do versus having anxiety and stress over, oh my goodness, what's happening with my parents.
Right. Absolutely. And so I think it's just, as the couples listening, just don't ever hesitate to put your marriage where God wants it. I mean, the word is God first, your spouse second, and then kids. But that's the order God set it, and there was a reason for that, because the kids are going to be gone someday.
Right.
And
you're going to be in the empty nest.
And you're going to be there. And if you don't nurture your marriage during that time, I think the stat that bothers me a lot now is how many divorces are happening with couples who married 30 plus years.
Yes.
And I think it's my feeling, without seeing any research or anything, is that you just didn't nurture your marriage during those years. Either your career or your kids or something else kept the marriage on the back burner or at the bottom of the stack. And now you're suffering for it, because it's like you don't even know each other. And I think it's so important. The couples I see make that transition from kids to empty nest the best are the ones who have nurtured their marriage all the way through. And I remember when our kids left for college with both of them, and they left 3 years apart. But it was like our job, that was what we wanted. That's what we worked for, is for them to do that. Sure, there was some sadness, and it was, a little bit of adjustment. But when you finally realize, I don't have to be home to cook anybody dinner tonight, I don't have to be home to help with homework, all those kind of things, you have this freedom that you had in the early part of your marriage. And it's like, oh, wow, this is really fun. And if you've nurtured your marriage, I think you just step right into that and really embrace and enjoy that.
Yeah. When our daughter went off to college, you just made me think about this, but when our daughter went off to college, she called one night and we were at home, and I said, I'm so sorry, I can't talk right now. I'll call you back. And then a couple of nights later, she called and we were out, and I said, I'm so sorry, I got to call you back. And it happened a third time, and she said, what are you all doing? You are not at home. And I'm like, now you know what we weren't doing when you were home, and we're just enjoying the empty nest. So, I think that's really important.
And I think those things where couples disconnect, it does happen gradually, I think. And we kind of say, well, that's not that big a deal. We'll catch up with this later or something. But it's this kind of deal where we drift apart a little bit at a time. One of my examples that always comes to me is when my second grandson, we were at the beach, and he and I went out to jump waves and stuff, and we were out there probably an hour, and we started walking back to the beach, and he goes, where's our stuff? And we looked, and it was way down the beach. Well, we were having so much fun, we didn't realize we were drifting. And I think that's what happens a lot in couples. It's just, we just kind of drift, and all of a sudden we're not having our date nights, and we're scrolling through social media in bed instead of having those conversations we used to have. And just the things that we just kind of little things, and then all of a sudden we feel more disconnected because we're not doing the things that connect us. And they're so important to keep doing those things and to make time for. I had a couple that they would, they had 4 kids, I think, but they were willing to lose some sleep to stay up and spend time together after the kids were in bed. And I remember the wife telling me, she said, we're tired a lot, but our marriage is so good right now because we're taking that time. Yeah. So sometimes it does mean there's going to be a little sacrifice. But it's okay, because the end result is going to be so worth it.
Yeah. How much do you think, we talk about peer pressure with teenagers.
Yeah.
we don't talk a lot about it in adulthood, but it feels like it's very real. Especially in parenting, in career, or people even just saying, oh, your child should be in Little League. Oh, your child should be doing this. Oh, you need to be involved in these activities. So there's all this peer pressure to perform. What do you say to couples about that, especially in these early years?
I think you've got to have those conversations with each other. What do we want for our kids? We sat down and did that because it was pretty obvious our son was pretty athletic, and he was already people wanting him to play baseball at 5 years old and stuff like that. But so we said we got to have a plan, and so we kind of came up with some things what we would do and what we would not do. There was they could only play one sport at a time, and we had an off season, and we did some things like that, and we made sure we had time to do the things as a family that we wanted to do, and tried to not get influenced as much by other people. Somebody says, if your son doesn't start baseball when he's 5, he's probably not going to the major leagues. Well, he's not going to go anyway. Be realistic. The percentage
of are going are not great.
No, the odds and percentages are not very good for that to happen. And so, I think you've got to take control yourself, and you've got to support each other in that. And I think that's how you weather those storms. Because I've had couples that have gotten their kids, and I'm not against things. I just think you've got to manage things. But you get on travel teams, it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of dedication, and you got to decide, is it worth it? Is that worth it? Is that going to make, could our kid be on a rec team instead of an elite team and still be okay? Just because Billy and Bobby are on the elite team doesn't mean we have to make that sacrifice. And I know those are hard decisions sometimes, but I think you've got to be clear together what your goal is and what road you want to travel with your kids over the years that they're home. Does that make sense?
Oh, most definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just think the intentional conversation about what's right for our family is a really healthy conversation, because, some people, they may be able to do that. I remember talking with a woman one time. She and her husband had 9 children. He's a physician. He often did not get home until 8:00, but she said, we always have dinner together. And I said, how do you do that? And she said, well, we've just figured it out. The kids come home, they do their homework. Some of them participate in sports, but everybody knows 8:00 is sacred. We all sit down at the table together and we eat and we talk about our day. And she said that works for us. It doesn't work for everybody else, but I loved that, because I just thought you guys have been intentional about having conversation and not just letting it happen, however it's going to fall.
Yeah, because I think that's one thing you can't just wing it with that. You really need to be intentional, or you're gonna get caught up in all those other things.
Yeah.
And then you're gonna look back, and a year's passed, or 2 years, or 3 years, and you feel like, man. And so, we made a list of things we wanted to enjoy with our kids to be exposed to, from travel places to different things. And so we kind of had a roadmap of kind of what we wanted to do. And our kids love it. Sunday night was family night, always. And so they knew growing up, they didn't plan anything with friends on Sunday night. And we'd either go out, or we'd eat pizza, or we'd watch some movie together, or, swim, something, but that was kind of sacred. And our kids we started young, and they just never balked at it. They just kind of, every once in a while one of them would say, well, so-and-so's doing something. And I'd say, now what night is it? And they go, oh yeah, that's Sunday night. Okay, never mind. But I think you helped them understand what the expectations are. And we made it fun. It wasn't like we just all sat around and, we did fun things, and just to enjoy our kids and have conversations with them at the different stages of life. And one of our goals was always that when our kids left home, we would be best friends with them as adults. I wanted my kids to be best friends, and they are. And I think a lot of what we did helped that to happen, for sure.
Well, and one of the things I love about that is that you have created some really great memories of not by doing anything fancy, but just setting up a time when everybody knew this is our time, family time.
Yep. And the same thing you do that with, like we said, with the marriage, with your date nights, with the things that you do. I loved what the family that had dinner at 8:00, because that was when we could all be together and looking for those opportunities with your spouse and then also with your kids and just holding those sacred.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to talk about one more thing before we wrap, and that is boundaries. I know that most people, it is just very unusual for someone to walk out the door, kind of like you said, saying, I'm going to wreck my marriage today, to go out and say, I'm going to go look for a friendship with someone of the opposite sex, and we're going to end up having an affair. People don't do that. However, most affairs start very innocently. And I'm just wondering what you would say to our listeners about how do you protect your marriage from just naively doing something that could set you up in harm's way?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question, and I think it's harder in our culture now than it probably has been. There's a lot more men and women both in the workplace now, so you're usually going to be working around other people. I think you've got to be very intentional about this, and I think you've got to really sit down together and say, okay, what is our game plan here? Well, what we did, ours was neither one of us had a meal with someone of the opposite sex.
Yeah.
We just, if I had a meeting and a woman was going to be there, I either took somebody else from my office or their office, so it wasn't like that. So we did things, I remember Andy Stanley talking one time when they were building a campus, and it was about 20-minute drive, and he and his assistant took separate cars. Because he said, I just don't want anyone to see something. I just don't want to open the door a little bit, Yeah. I remember Billy Graham saying that he never got in an elevator. He always wanted with the door open it to be just him there. If there's a woman in it, and he just would pass that elevator up and not go. Yeah. So I think part of it is just being very intentional about it. Watch what your conversations are. You've got to, if you're in business with someone, talk about the business things, but when you cross over into personal things, it really makes a difference. I remember the example that Pastor Tommy Nelson gave that really always stuck to me. He said it's kind of like a tennis game. He said you kind of hit the ball across. If nobody hits it back, then you go walk off the court. But if somebody hits it back, then you think, and you hit it back. And all of a sudden, it continues. And the little things of just talking at the coffee bar at work or talking in line at the donut shop or something becomes, now what time do you come to the donut shop? Oh, I think I'll be here at that time. And it just, little things like that happen. The best for us, protection for our marriage has been having a good marriage. Because I decided a long time ago, I don't want to give this up. I don't want to do something really stupid that would cause this to wreck. And, and I think we feel responsibility wherever we are, certainly in ministry of what we do, that, if I had an affair, so many people would be devastated. And I'm not going to do that. First to Nancy and my kids and grandkids, but just to other people too. And I think we all have that responsibility. And I think we live in a culture that takes that lightly a lot and takes divorce lightly.
So many, people have said, "Oh, that's so passé." Like seriously, it's so old school, and yet, it is the thing. If you are intentional, that can protect you.
I agree. And I think just when someone asks me like that, I said, somebody that had an affair. I said, and they'll say yes because most of us do. I said, go ask them how it started. And every time they come back and they go, okay, that makes sense what you're saying.
So innocent.
Because, it starts innocent. And so I think you've got to, it's not how close you can get to the fire without getting burned. It's how far away you can stay away from it. Yeah. And we want to stay as far away from it as we can. And, I I think prayer, I think spending time with our spouse, growing our marriage, all those things help keep us safer. We still have to be
on your guard.
Also, and to know that you're vulnerable. I mean, I think anytime we say we're not vulnerable, we're in trouble. You know,
I'm not the most vulnerable.
I was a man long before I was a husband or a, ministry or anything else, and so, we have to protect ourselves for sure.
Yeah. Gosh. Whew, so much good, rich nuggets for us to feed on. I am curious. I always ask everybody, what is one thing that you would tell couples, hey, do this practical thing on the daily, and it will have a significant positive impact on your marriage? What would you say that thing is?
Yeah, it would be praying together. We've prayed together probably 99% of the nights of our marriage. And I wish I could say I was the one who brought it into our marriage. I didn't. Nancy did. On our wedding night, she said, we need to start praying together. And she had a mentor that told her the most important thing you can do is pray with your husband. And we were awkward. It was awkward for a long time. And we prayed silently together a lot. And then we'd say the Lord's Prayer out loud, or we'd share things we wanted to be praying about. But I would encourage couples, start somewhere. And you're not performing for God. You're not performing from your spouse. You're just, even if you just say, God, help us with our marriage. Help us have the marriage you want us to have. Yeah. Just something simple, but get in the habit of doing it. And then what I always tell couples, I say, don't get legalistic, but if you miss one night, don't miss two. Pick it up the next day. Yes. And just be consistent with that. You will see a difference. We saw God take us to where we got to where, like our kids were growing up, we'd be stuck on something trying to decide for the kids. And one of us would say, we haven't prayed about it, and would pray about it. And I swear over and over, we had the answer immediately. I mean, it was just crazy. And I think God was just showing us, why don't you come to me first? Because I've got the answers that you need. And so I think prayer draws us closer together. There's an intimacy in that. I think there's a stat that says that couples that pray together have a better sex life. And so for the guys out there, maybe that'll motivate you to pray. But I think that would be the one thing I'd say. And just start somewhere and just let God lead you in that.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. It has really been insightful and practical. I love that. So thank you very much for being with us. Thank you all for joining us on today's podcast. We'll have Dr. Kim's books in the show notes. And for more resources and updates, you can go to marriageonthedaily.com to get more. And until next time, remember, it's the little things on the daily that matter most in your marriage.